Chapter 1. The day the world went silent, the world didn't end with an explosion. A strange, soft, pulsing whisper that came from the sky. Before everything burned, before everything broke, before the storms learned how to move and breathe, Rhett Calder remembered the sound better than he remembered people's faces. He had been on a mountain line that day, a wildfire crewman, boots in ash, helmet dripping sweat, cutting a break to stop a blaze outside Flagstaff. It was supposed to be like any other day the world tried to burn. Then the sky flashed white, so bright the treetops seemed to peel away like paper curling in a flame. The radios died first, every single one. Static swallowed the channel, screaming in their ears like a beast waking up. Then the helicopters overhead fell out of the sky, not spiraled. They simply dropped, like someone had cut the strings of a marionette. Rhett watched one of them hit the tree line. He still heard the explosion in his dreams. Or maybe he never stopped hearing it. The next seconds were worse. Every piece of metal around them began to hum. Their tools, their trucks, even the nails in their fire boots. A vibration that sank into their bones. And then came the whisper, a warm, rippling, electric murmur that felt like it was sliding behind his thoughts and rearranging them. When the white light faded, half his crew was down, some unconscious, some convulsing, some staring blankly into the treetops, whispering back at the sky. Rhett tried to drag them to safety, but the second wave hit, a surge of electromagnetic force so violent that it charred the radios in their hands, melted the dashboard of the fire truck, and lit the horizon with a curtain of shimmering blue static. That was the moment civilization ended. 15 years later, Rhett woke to the same hum. Not from machines, there were no machines anymore, but from the air itself, vibrating through the broken windows of the abandoned ranger station he called home. He sat up, hand instinctively going to the hatchet at his side. The world was always testing him now. Do you want to live? Every single day. He rose, stretched out the stiffness from another night on a cold floor, and stepped outside. Dawn painted the wasteland in pale oranges and bruised purples. The sun filtered through a distant band of drifting static clouds. They moved like fog. But wrong. Too deliberate. Too aware. Rhett scanned the tree line. He heard nothing. No birds. No insects. Only wind, and the faint, low thrum that meant a static storm was passing somewhere miles away. He slung his pack over his shoulder and headed into the ruins of the old visitor center. He'd set traps the night before, pressure snares, tripwires, and a few improvised noisemakers crafted from thin wire and scavenged cans. Nothing had been disturbed. Even the desperate avoided this sector. The forests here had become twisted, the trees warped and fused by years of electromagnetic surges. He stepped deeper into the rubble, searching for anything useful: food, filters, cloth, old tools. He didn't expect to find much. But then, a sound cut through the stillness. A crackle, soft, faint, impossible. It came from a half-buried emergency locker near the wall. Rhett knelt, brushed away soot and dead leaves, and pried the door open. Inside lay a battered emergency radio, the exact model he'd used the day the world ended. Its casing was scorched. The antenna was bent. No power source connected. Yet the speaker whispered with static. Rhett lifted it slowly. A part of him wanted to drop it, to throw it away and run. Another part, the part that had never stopped wondering what really happened 15 years ago, forced him to raise it to his ear. The static shifted. Then a voice came through, broken, distorted, desperate. Rhett Calder, if you hear this, you must reach me. I am the cartographer. The last frequency is failing. The transmission cut out. Silence swallowed the room. Rhett stood there, gripping the radio, pulse thundering in his ears. Someone knew his name. Someone was still broadcasting. Someone who shouldn't exist. The radio that shouldn't work. Rhett they were waiting for a long time. He just stood there, holding the radio, listening to the echo of a voice that should have been impossible. The world had been silent for a decade and a half. Not until now. He turned the radio over in his hands. Its back panel was cracked open, wires exposed, battery compartment empty. It wasn't just damage, it was dead. Dead like everything else. And yet, like a breath, like something alive inside, Rhett raised again, hoping for another transmission. Nothing. Just soft, shifting snow. He touched the side of the casing, and the radio gave a tiny spark. And whispered. Not a voice. Not words. Just a faint, eerie pulse that made the hair on his arms lift. Rhett swallowed hard. 15 years ago, the radio had been screaming the day his crew died. Now it spoke again, calling his name. He shoved the device into his pack, zipped it tight, and forced himself to think. Whoever the cartographer was, they knew him. They knew something about the quiet storm. Maybe even why it happened. But why call him now? Why after all these years? Rhett left the ruined visitor center and stepped into the cold morning air. The sun was climbing, washed out behind thick haze. The static storm he'd heard earlier was drifting far to the west, a glimmering wall of white-blue sparks traveling slowly across the treeline. He scanned the horizon. No movement, no signs of predators, no scavengers. He reached for his canteen. Empty. He'd need water soon. Rhett started down the cracked asphalt trail, leading toward an old ranger medical outpost. He'd passed through it once years ago. Maybe there were still supplies there, gauze, antibiotics, filters. As he walked, the forest around him groaned softly. The trees here were wrong, bending at unnatural angles. Their bark stretched and bubbled like melted plastic. He passed a trunk with metal embedded deep in its rings. A street sign melted into the wood, as if the tree had grown around it overnight. Another reminder of the world the storm had twisted. Rhett reached the outpost by midday. The building sat crooked, half-collapsed, but its front doors were still intact. He approached carefully, listening. Too quiet. He nudged the door open with the tip of his hatchet. Inside, dust swirled in beams of light, cutting through holes in the roof. Medical cabinets lined the walls. A few old gurneys lay overturned, rusted wheels locked in place. He moved cautiously down the hall, checking corners, stepping over debris. A floorboard creaked behind him. Rhett spun, hatchet raised. Someone was there. A woman, thin, sharp-eyed, wearing scavenged tactical gear that didn't match. Sleeves rolled up, hands steady. She held a metal rod in one hand like a club and looked ready to swing. "That's close enough," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, eyes that had seen too much. Rhett lowered the hatchet slightly, but didn't sheath it. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said. "Good," she replied, "because trouble is something I'm fresh out of patience for." A long moment passed. Then she nodded toward his side. "You're bleeding." Rhett glanced down. A thin, dark line of dried blood ran from a gash on his forearm. He hadn't noticed it after the static storm chase. "I can patch you up," she continued, "if you're not stupid." He hesitated. In the wastelands, trust was currency. Rare, easily stolen, usually fatal. But he needed the help. He lowered the hatchet fully. The woman stepped closer, but kept her guard up. "I'm Nora," she said. "Rhett." She gave no reaction to his name. Nora motioned to a small room near the back, where she'd set up a makeshift clinic, a lamp powered by a solar rig, shelves lined with cleaned instruments, jars of filtered water. Rhett sat while she inspected the cut. "You're lucky," she said. "Could have gotten infected." She dabbed it with alcohol. Rhett hissed sharply. "You fire guys always this dramatic?" "It stings," he muttered. "It's supposed to." As she wrapped the arm, Rhett's pack shifted, and a faint crackle sounded from inside. Nora froze. "What was that?" Rhett's heart sank. "Nothing," he said too quickly. Nora stepped back, eyes narrowing. "That wasn't nothing. That was a radio." Her expression changed from suspicion to disbelief to something like fear. "You're going to show me," Nora said quietly, "or I'm going to assume you picked up something very dangerous." Rhett hesitated only a moment before pulling it out. The broken, impossible emergency radio. Nora stared at it. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." "It spoke," Rhett said. "To you?" "Yes." She stepped closer, voice lowered. "What did it say?" Rhett swallowed. called itself a cartographer. Her face drained of color. She took a single step back. Echoes and static the sun dipped low in the ruins of Ridgeway. Not again. Avery climbed the hill overlooking the valley. From here, the old radio tower stood like a broken finger jutting from the earth. Twisted metal scorched, half collapsed. But even now, it hummed. Faint, barely there, but unmistakably alive. Avery raised the walkie. Static crackled, then bled into something else, a low tone, like a heartbeat beneath white noise. He swallowed, steadying his breath. Maybe the voice from last night wasn't a malfunction. Maybe somebody really was out there. Down the hill, a sudden metallic clatter echoed through the empty streets. Avery crouched, hand on the grip of his knife. Movement. A shadow flickered between the abandoned bus and the pharmacy. Too fast to be a scavenger. Too quiet to be a person. Then the walkie hissed sharply, and a whisper threaded through the static. "You're being followed." Avery froze. Not by fear, but by recognition. The voice was the same one from last night. Calm. Controlled. Almost. Guiding. "Who are you?" he whispered. Nothing. Just static. Whatever was moving down there didn't wait. Avery slung his pack over his shoulder and started toward the tower, the only place left to get answers. And behind him, something followed, matching each of his footsteps, one heartbeat delayed. Chapter 4. The tower that still breathes. The tower loomed overhead as Avery stepped through the rusted entrance. Birds scattered from the rafters. Wind howled through the broken panels. Inside, the central console lay half buried under dust and fallen beams, but the power module glowed a faint orange. Someone had been here recently. Avery knelt beside the console. The wiring was ancient, frayed, patched with scraps of copper and tape. But one piece stood out, a modern signal amplifier, clean, polished, untouched by the apocalypse. "Where did you come from?" he whispered. The walkie hissed again. "You made it." Avery jolted upright. "Who are you?" A low hum vibrated through the tower. Not mechanical, almost organic. "I monitor the unbroken frequencies. And you are not alone in Ridgeway. Leave now." Avery tightened his grip on the walkie. "Not until you tell me why you warned me." Silence. Then, behind him, the sound of a boot on metal. Avery turned slowly. At the doorway stood a figure in a gray survival coat, visor reflecting the dying light. He carried a rifle slung over one shoulder, not raised, but ready. "Step away from the console," the man ordered. Voice steady. Professional. Avery didn't move. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly. "I should be asking you the same thing. That tower isn't for civilians." He stepped closer. "This frequency isn't meant to be discovered." Avery's pulse hammered. "What's on it?" The man hesitated, a flicker of something like fear passing across his visor. "Something that survived the world ending," he said quietly, "and it wants you to keep listening."